I'm Carmen Corona, la voz que no tiene miedo de decirlo como es.
I'm Chris Vega, trayéndote la sabiduría y la gracia de una verdadera chingona.
I'm Stephanie Pineda, the force that breaks barriers and paves her own way.
Juntas vamos a explorar temas que van desde la cultura latina hasta el empoderamiento femenino y todo lo que hay en medio.
Prepárense para reír, aprender y sentirse inspirados con nosotras.
And this is Chingonas Chronicles.
Welcome to another episode of Chingonas Chronicles. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have Sandra Arroyo here with us as our guest. Sandra, how are you?
Good. A little nervous. Never had a mic in front of me like this.
It's okay. We're just chismeando, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like too professional. We're friends here. A little bit about Sandra from me. You know, like I met Sandra in middle school, right? I think we were in middle school.
Abbott.
Yeah, it was like in middle school. So it's crazy that like to this day, you know, like now coming full circle and we're both professionals and we're getting to reconnect. So I wanted to bring Sandra to the podcast because I believe she's a chingona in her industry. She's, you know, an RN, right? You're an RN. And she had to go through COVID. Like we all know how crazy that was. That was insane. So tell us, Sandra, a little bit about that. Like how was bringing your team through COVID and, you know, like everything that you guys had to endure?
So I started working at Loyola, I think it was 2019 around April. So COVID, I think, hits really like March 2020. So at that time, I only had like 1 year of experience under my belt, which is crazy because like at that time we felt really like just so overwhelmed with on top of being a new nurse and learning everything. Loyola was a level 1 trauma hospital. Like the sickest of the sickest go there. Wow. So we saw a lot of stuff going on. And then one day it started with one patient. They were all very hush-hush about it. They had us all pull up into like a room and they're like, hey, just so you know, this patient has COVID. It was 1-to-1. So that nurse only took care of that patient and that was it. And then, you know, 1 became 3 and 3 became 5. And then suddenly they stopped surgeries around March. So we had all the private rooms. It was a 32-bed unit. So then they closed everything down. They stopped all the surgeries and we became the COVID unit.
Wow.
It was crazy at first. I mean, people were coming in like just super healthy, like no issues at all. People that like, había gente mexicana que unfortunately they worked at a fábrica and someone had gotten it there and they had no comorbidities. And then it was just crazy to see these people decline so fast. You would see them like talking and then like an hour or 2 later or like a couple hours later, we were already intubating them and sending them to the ICU, like on a ventilator. So it was rough. It was very emotional because then sicker people started coming. Then it started hitting the nursing homes and then that's when it got really, really tough. Because it was people with a lot of medical problems, people that were extremely sick.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if we saw that the patient had asthma, we're like, it's not going to end up like well, or like chronic pulmonary disease, it was just not going to end up well. It was tough. I mean, at work, like, you know, we weren't going outside. We weren't like being social as we were. You know, our society just kind of stopped at that time. So it became like we bonded a lot between us nurses. That's kind of how we like got, but we were always very scared to take it home or that we would get it. I would say that was a very stressful time, like very. And it was emotional too because like I remember I had this dad. He had 6 kids. He was pretty much the breadwinner. Era de Ecuador. And he, like, it was just not looking good for him. So as we were, like, about to intubate him, he's like, can you please just tell my family that I love them very much. And I never forgot that, ever. Like, I could still see his face. Like, he just looked so terrified. It was just so sad because it's like, how do you... Like in nursing, here the craziest thing I think it's that you deal with something so emotional as like that, and then you're like, okay, snap out of it. You gotta go take care of the next person.
Yeah,
it's so crazy how we have to like switch it up like right away. So we spend a lot of time decompressing because we're like going through it in some sort of way. It was heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Not only was it heavy work, wearing all the N95 and all the gear that we had to wear and stuff, but just like emotionally too. Like we were all like emotionally, mentally, physically drained.
Wow. What was something that you feel that you did that helped you with your mental health during that time?
Talking about it with people. I became really, really close with my coworkers at that time. We were just, a lot of us on night shift, we were all young. We were all like, younger nurses. So that's what helped a lot. YouTube videos helped a lot. Like I was just watching shows and stuff, anything. Because I really wasn't like outside or anything. Like I was working. And then during that time, like I was pulling like 4 or 5 day, like weeks, like 12 hours. So it was just insane. Like I was just like working. I don't want to sound like a workaholic, but there was nothing else to do. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just work. But then, it got a lot. It was very stressful.
So you had to kind of find something to decompress, like you said. Okay.
Like started reading, all that kind of deal, anything to just get my mind off. But most of the time, to be honest with you, I was sleeping because I'm like, I have to catch up.
Yeah, because you were working like double shifts and stuff like that, right? Yeah. Oh, wow. I can't even imagine like what you had to go through, like you said, with the patients, with like all the mental stress, all of that stuff. It's just so
it's crazy because like everyone, I think, not that I think people talk about it like in a positive note, but I think people have like a nostalgic like tone to it because I hear people being like, oh, COVID was awesome. I work from home. I did this, and I made this viral coffee on TikTok that I saw and whatnot. And I was like, wow, like so many of us had different like sides to it. Like I was literally in the trenches, and some people were just like, having a different completely experience than I was.
Yeah. It's crazy how like people's perspectives, like different people's perspectives, because I was one of those people that I got to work from home.
Yeah.
But it did also, like, because I didn't have anything to do, like anywhere to go, it was like I had to do something for my mental health too, because, but so that compared to what you had to go through, it's like, wow, insane. Like, the fact that you're still here and you are now telling those stories, like it helps other people in your field, I feel like, right? To get through let's say they had a terrible day and you're like, hey, it's not COVID, right? Like at least it's not COVID, like you're doing good. It's like they say, it's a bad day, not a bad life, right? But tell us a little bit about like who motivated you to do what you do today. Like who kind of like did you have a mentor, or did you have somebody that motivated you to take on the career that you took on?
My mom and my dad, for sure. My mom and my dad came to the U.S. like, typical, they crossed, they became legalized thanks to like when Ronald Reagan was president, and he did the amnesty during that time. But they work really hard, and I didn't realize how hard did they struggle until they started telling me when I was a little bit older. I just didn't want that to go to waste. I'm like, my dad was working almost 6-7 days a week. My mom had no idea how this country operated or anything like that. Like, she came into a place in a world where I think like she could never imagine, or she had no idea. So I always think like, oh my God, like they must have been so scared like coming here because they had no idea how the US really operated. It's a completely different world from Mexico. So just seeing them work so hard, I just didn't want that to go to waste. I was like, I can't be one of those kids where I'm like, their parents came and sacrificed everything for them, and I'm just going to throw it away by doing like dumb things. I just didn't want to be that. And also like, I just wanted to like succeed because like, at that time, I don't know if it's because of like my family and such, but there wasn't many of us that were pulling through to college and doing all that stuff. And for a while, I honestly thought that I wasn't meant to go that route. For a while, I thought, oh, maybe like I just belong in like a fabrica and that's going to be my life. And, that's what I'm going to do. And hopefully like I find like some nice job and kind of go through there. Honestly, I didn't really think seriously of college, to be honest with you, like in high school and stuff. I didn't know what to do. I think in Hispanic culture, we don't motivate our kids enough to be like, you can be more than what you, like anything you want, but you can really do it.
Yeah.
And I can't blame my parents because, like, I love my mom and my dad. I just wish they would have, like, motivated me a little bit more to be like, hey, you know, there's a bigger world out there. But, you know, now that I think about it, now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, they were learning as well.
Right. They did what they could with what they had.
With what they had, exactly.
Yeah. Because I completely, like, connect to that because my parents are the same. Like, my parents are like, oh, look at te haga feliz, you know, whatever makes you happy, we're happy. But my parents, I feel like they sometimes try to be like, oh, like, take, like, swimming classes, take karate classes, things like that. But I was like, very scared to fail because I wanted to make my parents proud. So I decided not to take on, like, certain classes or whatever the case may be. So I feel like at one point my parents were like, okay, you know, whatever you want to do, it's fine with us. But same thing, you know, like, they didn't know how to help me through college applications. They didn't know how to help me through, you know, like, navigate through college or scholarships and things like that. So, like, I had to figure it out all by myself. And it's crazy to think about it, but it's like, well, they don't really know any of this stuff. Like, they never went through that themselves. So we had to figure it out. Right?
And I don't know, were you a first generation
yes,
too?
I was.
Yes, so was I. And I think, like, it was hard for us as well because, you know, our parents didn't go to college. They didn't understand the FAFSA application process. They're always like, oh, échale ganas y estudiale. But I'm like, okay. Then I found out there's more than just estudiale and échale ganas. Like, there is a lot of ganas that you got to put into this whole process. I had no idea about FAFSA. I had such a sweet high school counselor that to this day, like, I thank her. I have her on Facebook and I thank her so much because she just showed me that there was a bigger world for me out there, that I was meant for something more. And she helped me through the whole, like, college application. Like, girl, honestly, like, when we took the ACTs junior year, like, I did not take it seriously at all. I don't know how I scored what I scored, but, like, honestly, like, I remember, like, kids were, like, paying, like, crazy amount of money for, like, these prep classes.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I was just like, number one, I don't have
the
funds for that, and number two, like, what do you mean, like, prep classes? Like, I was just so, like, bamboozled by it. I was just like, I'm just gonna take it. But honestly, I don't think I understood the seriousness that was that test to, like, everything else until later on. When I started going into college, I'm like, oh wow, these scores really they really affected.
Yeah, they really matter.
Future. Yeah, they matter.
No, I completely agree. Like, there was times where I had a lot of friends in the academies because our high schools had academies, and, like, you know, certain kids would go to these AP classes and these honors classes. And when I moved to Elgin High, because I went to Larkin but then Elgin, there was the gifted academy. So it was like all these kids that were going into medical school, attorneys, and, you know, stuff like that. And I remember one day that I was in badminton and I had a friend in badminton, and she was such a sweet person, and she helped me a lot actually through my college applications because she had parents that knew what they were doing. And so she helped me. And I remember that she was telling me, she's like, oh, why don't you use just this application? They gave us the app in class, and they told us you can use this app to fill out the college applications for you. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? They never gave me that app. She's like, yeah, our teacher so-and-so gave it to us in class, and she shows me the app. And all you do is you put your basic information, and it fills out whatever college application you wanted them to do for you. And you just click, like, I want this one, this one, this one, and it fills it out for you and submits it. All you have to do is submit your payment with it. And I was like, this would be so helpful for first generation students. And we had no idea about it. But then I found out it's because they were only giving it to the gifted students.
Which is, like, so bad because, like, so many people could benefit it. And you know what? Like, now that you mentioned this whole, like, academy and all that stuff, like, yeah, like, 'cause we had, like, the AP classes too. So the AP kids were, like, you know, getting resources and getting like the nicer stuff than I think most regular classes. I feel.
And you know what, I kind of, well, I didn't know about the AP classes either. Like, again, first generation, we didn't know what that was. We didn't know about honors classes, AP classes. They would talk about it sometimes, but only to certain people. And I remember my classes were so easy for me, but nobody ever told me like, oh, you can go to a more challenging class because you have straight A's here, or you have, like whatever the case may be. But nobody ever told me that.
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot of the times we had to be the ones asking the questions to get the information.
Exactly.
And I feel that it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
Like all the resources should be given to every student.
Yeah. Regardless of their background or whatever, I think
Right.
resources should be available. And to this day, I think we've gotten a little bit better with the resources. But honestly, if you were to ask like a group of like Latinos, you could probably still see a deficit there, which is sad because like it's been such a long time since we've been in school.
Girl,
that,
through
like,
10 years this
it's
year.
been 10 years since we graduated. That's crazy. But like we still see that deficit, and I just think that we really shouldn't.
Right. Yeah, and me as the older sister, I always try to teach my siblings and tell them like, you have me now. Like you don't have to struggle the way I did. I can help you through these things.
Yeah.
And I tell them like, if your friends need help, tell them to come to me. Like if they don't have a big sister, I'll be their big sister.
Right.
Like because I wish I had somebody like that growing up. And I do feel that was definitely like something growing up where it's like, am I really meant to be here?
Right.
Did you feel that you have kind of like imposter syndrome?
Define imposter syndrome. Like what do you
Pretty much like, if you got to a certain point in your career and you're like, why am I here? Am I really meant to be here? Like, why me?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. All the time. Because my field is predominantly like Caucasian dominated. It's female dominated. It's very women like driven, but it is you see a lot more white people than you see any other ethnicity. Even in Sherman, being in like Elgin and being such a big like Hispanic, like even melting pot of a community, you don't see that many Hispanic nurses. You see a lot of like Hispanic workers and stuff, but in like the nurses, from what I see, there's a few, but like we're like outnumbered. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like, why am I like even meant to be a nurse? I don't know, because sometimes I work with some nurses and I'm like, wow, they're so like smart, like they know what they're doing, like they project that. And it's like, it makes me feel like I'll have a moment where I'm like, oh, I don't do I know what I'm doing? Like, how did I end up here? Like, I'll have like a whole identity crisis, and then I snap out of it and I'm like, wait a minute, no, you've been doing this for like 4 years now. Like, you know what you're doing. Like, you come with experience. And I think that's what you just have to remind yourself, like what it took you to get here. You worked hard, you did your dues, you did what you had to do. You're meant to be here. I think that's what we have to remind ourselves, like, you're meant to be here. I always believe in like destiny and like you're meant to be where you're at. I think timing is all perfectly somehow calculated. You are meant to be where you are. So that's why whenever I think, oh, I don't like belong here, or I don't know what I'm doing, or why am I in this place, I think, no, I'm right where I need to be. And if it doesn't make sense now, it'll make sense later.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree. And I feel that I've had the same, where I'm like, why am I here, and like, or I'll be, I don't know why, I'll have these like random moments of like, thank you God for putting me in this place. Like, thank you for having my parents bring me to the US because a lot of times it's like you just have to be grateful because of where you are.
Yeah. And you know what, Carmen, like my first job as a nurse, like it was a complete failure. I was working at a nursing home, like a rehab, and that was my first job. The job market in like healthcare was crazy back then. It was so like competitive, like there wasn't that many openings as there is now. My first job was a failure. I was not doing great. Like I was so overwhelmed. It felt more like I was just like passing meds, and I really wasn't just doing like what I was supposed to do, like the typical nurse that assesses and takes care of one. Like I wasn't doing any of that. I was just passing medications. Like I felt like a robot. I got really depressed, and I actually ended up really leaving because it was getting really bad. I was so unhappy, and I think that's where imposter syndrome kicked in for a while, because I was like, I don't know if I like even belong in this field. Like, was it the wrong choice? And then, you know, my friend referred me to Loyola, and then that's when shit started changing a lot.
And you're like, yeah, maybe I was just in the wrong place.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just at the wrong place, and that's when everything started making sense. And then that's where I was like, I was thinking Diosito a lot, because I'm like, okay, it worked out. Maybe I just had to struggle a little bit more to get where I needed to be, and here I am.
You had to overcome challenges to get to where you are. What would you say is like the biggest challenge of being a woman and a minority in your industry?
I think being a woman in my industry, I don't think it's too bad, considering that my profession is very woman driven. I think just some challenges that like we see is that sometimes, you know, we talk to like male doctors and surgeons, so sometimes you feel like there's like a little friction of like, you know, they kind of talk down on you just because you're just kind of a nurse. Luckily, like my surgeons at Sherman, like they're amazing, they're great people to work with. I can honestly tell you that I haven't had a problem in that sort. As far as being a minority in Sherman, for my patients, it's an advantage because we have a lot of Hispanic patients come in. So when they see me, being as a nurse, and then they see like, oh, I tell them like, oh, no hablo español, and it's just an immediate relief. And that relief on their faces never gets old. Like, it's so nice to see that relief. So in terms of my patients, like, it's great. Like, I don't think it's a challenge. I think it's like a blessing that I get to talk fluently both in Spanish and in English. From like a nurse perspective and everything else, it feels weird. There's, like I told you, there's not that many like Hispanic nurses working. There's only, I think, 3 like on my floor. So there's like a lot. Like not a lot of presence, I guess I would say. Sometimes you see things that you don't want to see, Carmen. Like sometimes, like, you know, I'll see someone have like a Spanish speaking patient and they're like annoyed that they have to use like we use the iPad interpreter for like translation. So it's like a video caller, and we use that. We have to use that for every interaction and such. And it's sad because sometimes I feel like there's some doctors that really don't like want to use it, or they just kind of dismiss it, or they rely like on, like, let's say like on me that I speak Spanish, and then they don't really go see the patient, and I have to call them out on it. Like, I think that would be one of the challenges there, that I just have to call these guys out and check them. And it's like, why do I have to like check you to make sure that you're doing your job correctly? Like, why is this a language barrier such a problem? But I haven't had that issue too much here at Sherman, thankfully. At Sherman, we're part of a committee. Like, we all like do like research and like improving like quality and metrics and all that such and processes. And it's like a big group of people. There's like higher ups and such. And I was actually telling my coworker that we're like the 2 Hispanics out of this like big like 55 people group.
Wow.
And it feels so intimidating. It feels like almost like sometimes I'm like, oh wow, like I really don't belong here, or like my opinion like doesn't really matter. And there I go again. I have to remind myself like, hey, no, like you know what you're doing.
Yeah. You're here for a reason.
You're here for a reason. You know what you're doing. You've experienced so much already that your opinion matters. And I have to keep telling myself that quite often sometimes when I go through these kind of meetings.
Yeah. So you can force yourself to speak up and
because sometimes I have to speak. Sometimes like at first I wasn't really speaking because I'm like, well, you know, what can I say?
Yeah.
But then I'm like, wait a minute, like I have stuff to say. And it's like, why shouldn't I say it? Just because I feel intimidated by the lack of like that there's not a lot of Hispanic presence. We actually had I forget what her position was, but I think she was like a executive, like she was part of the Midwest like professional like governance stuff. And she was Hispanic. Her name was Rocio, and she came and talked to us, and it was just so cool because I was just like, look at her being like higher up like in the nursing world, and she's like Latina, and she's, you know, like it's just cool. She made it like it's cool to see one of us be up there, because it just goes to show you that it can be done. Like they're paving the way.
Yeah. It's one of those moments of like, if she can do it, I can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, I love the talking about, the field and all of that, but tell me a little bit about like challenges for yourself, like just you as a person. Like, tell me a little bit more about you, like just about yourself.
Like challenges like in my life as a minority. Man. So like in school, I started like a lot of kids, I guess, started, they learned English like right away. I did, but I learned it via cartoons. And so like my English like grammar and stuff wasn't great. So I didn't really go to like regular like English classes until I was like in 5th grade. So I always felt like I was behind for some reason. Like I always felt like I have like problems like keeping up and stuff. I the class that I was in school, because I remember I moved schools. I went to Highland, which was very like Hispanic-y, like very like all the Mexicans were there, which is great. And then I moved neighborhoods. I moved across over almost como por South Elgin. Y entonces like everything changed. So it was just like all güeritos, chinitos, and then just a couple Mexicans here and there. So it always felt weird, especially because that's the year that I transitioned to like English classes too. It always just felt like I didn't belong. I always felt like I was behind. Like I did all my work and stuff, but for some reason I was like, oh, these kids are like 50 times smarter than I am probably.
Yeah, because a lot of people in those areas have tutors, have private classes and things like that.
Yeah, and they were like in like sports and all these extracurricular activities, and like I wasn't anything. Like I was just like going to school and then like just going home and pretty much it. But these people were like, had so much stuff going on that I was like, wait, why am I not in that stuff?
Yeah.
But that maybe it's just because like what my parents didn't know about any of that stuff, or that they could do it. As a kid, like it was a struggle like during grade school, just because like my parents like worked night shift, so like I was pretty much taking care of myself for a while.
That's crazy.
So I had to like learn. There was a lot of stuff that I just needed help, like even like a math problem, Carmen, like I couldn't understand it, and it's like, who could I ask?
Yeah.
My mom and my dad weren't around. Like I literally had no one until I would go the next day and like ask my teacher. But then I'm so damn shy sometimes that like I wouldn't even ask, because I was just so shy. And I felt like sometimes asking questions when nobody else was, I was like, maybe I don't know, like maybe I'm stupid. Like I didn't even, like I wasn't understanding. But then, it took a while to be like, hey, it's not you. Like it's okay to ask questions. Like it's okay to like speak up.
Yeah. I do remember you being a very shy kid, like growing up. And I was the complete opposite. I was talking to everyone. I was asking all the questions. But, I feel that we coped with our childhoods different. And it's like you said, different perspectives and how we became who we are and stuff like that. But what would be one of, like, un consejo que le darías to your younger self?
Be patient with yourself. Be nicer to yourself. Because I think as a first generation, when we didn't know that many things, you just wanted to like know everything, and you wanted to succeed in everything. I wanted to make my parents proud with everything. I was not willing to accept failure. And I think to this day, I think I'm still a bit afraid of failure. Like I don't want to fail, because it's like I'm letting down my parents. But, I think there's nothing wrong with failure as long as you get back up and you have a plan. So I think I would just tell like my younger self, like, hey, it's okay if you don't make it out in the first time. Like it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
As cliche as that sounds, because I think I gave myself such a hard time. I think as a first generation like kid too, and being the older Hispanic kid, como que mis parents me decían like, oh, like, like they obviously wanted me to do well, but I always felt like there was this like weight on my shoulders, like you
Yeah.
got to do good. You're leading the family by example. So you better do everything right. I always felt that pressure. Always. And I felt like as a kid, I had that pressure way too much. And it affected, I think, in some ways, like how I became as an adult and like my personality. Like, I'm so afraid of failure. I was very hard on myself. So, like, if I could tell, like, my younger self, I'd be like, it's okay, like, be easy on yourself. You're learning too. Like, now that I understand that my parents were learning to be parents as they were going through, like, I needed to tell my younger self, you were learning to be a person of
We
your
were
own
learning
too.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was so nice to have you on the podcast. The conversation was
thank you,
great. I love
Carmen.
it. But we definitely need to get together more often because, I feel, like I
Yeah.
said, I think you're a chingona. You are killing it. And,
Thanks,
like,
Carmen.
it's just like coming full circle after going to school together and
As
everything.
well, because it's been
I
such a
know.
long time. Weren't we just sitting in, what was his name? Mr. Bowman's class, that weird teacher we had for Spanish or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
And now we're
Yeah.
here. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's just nice to see people that I talked to back in the day and just see them succeed.
Yeah.
Like, it's really cool. Because I think I kind of connected with you at that time when we were seventh graders, because you would talk about your parents too, and I was like, okay, like I have those same problems too in a way. So it was nice to like have someone that like knew what they were going through, and you were always very open with like your problems too, that I remember, and that was just always nice. It wasn't the typical like middle school talk or anything. Like, yeah, sure, we were always talking, like there was always something to talk about, but it was nice to talk about like the reality too as well. We were what we
Because
were
we
going
both
through
had
at
to
home.
realize at a young age that we were different, and we both had to grow up very soon in our lives. Yeah.
Faster. Yeah.
So I feel like that kind of connected us for sure. But thank you so much for coming today. It was nice
Thank
having
you.
you.
Thank you for having
And thank you
me.
so much for joining another episode of Chingona Chronicles. See you on the next one.